To the story now, according to reports out of Mozambique, scores of prisoners have escaped from a maximum security prison in Maputo after overpowering the guards. It's reported they managed to escape with a number of AK-47 rifles. The situation in Mozambique remains tense, with supporters of the opposition Podemos party disputing the electoral outcome. For more on this, we're joined by SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena. Good evening, Sophie. Any word from Mozambican government on the prison escape as yet?
No word yet, but we are told that it looks like this was well organized in terms of how the whole operation was executed, because they were even able to take the ammunition. As you know, that the AK-47 in Mozambique is the one of the weapons that they use as part of the military operations, and also including issues of security, because it is being used in that country. And there's fear that many of these guns are now, or these weapons are in the hands of some of the protesters, including those who escaped from prison. And therefore there's fear that later on these arms are going to be used, against ordinary people in Mozambique. But we are still waiting to hear from government confirming the exact number of people who have escaped in prison. And we are told, according to the reports, it's 6,000, but that's not the number that has been confirmed by government. The other issue is that it looks like even in the region of Cabo Delgado, there was also an escape there by people who were arrested. And you can imagine, possibly you'd have people who are linked to the insurgents in that region, and now they are out there. And the question is, what's going to happen to that region also, as we can see that many areas have been affected. There are protests and violent protests, and we are told that there are many people who have died this morning, some putting a death toll since yesterday to 100. I'm not counting the previous days, just yesterday and this morning.
Now, reports are that the prisoners overpowered the prison officials, but there's also a narrative now that possibly there could have been some level of collusion even with some of those prison officials. What are you hearing on the ground about this?
Well, you can't dismiss those reports, because when you look at what's happening in Mozambique right now, the security cluster, or the police, or the members of the military, you can see that there's some of them who at times collude or work with those who are protesting and joining them. And therefore, I'm not surprised that many people are saying that this was almost an inside job, or there was a cooperation between the prisoners and the prison authorities, or officials, or guards, or security. Because you can see that there's a huge security challenge in Mozambique as we speak. As I pointed out, we saw yesterday a military truck assisting those who were looting to be able to have access of a warehouse. And therefore you can see that there's a tendency from some of the military and also the police and the security people to work with those who are protesting. I think it's all about protecting themselves. When they see that now this wave is strong, they go with the current.
So what is the likelihood, though, Sophie, of government coming out to confirm that indeed prisoners have escaped? Because when speaking to one journalist in Maputo a bit earlier on, he stated that there is this tendency of government not to acknowledge any of these security breaches or some sort of a compromised security apparatus in the country, because they wouldn't want to come out and be seen as weak, which would embolden others to also make the attempt to further compromise the security. So what is the likelihood that government is actually going to come out officially and state that indeed our systems are vulnerable, prisoners have escaped?
They will have to accept this reality, because you can see the videos are now doing the round worldwide, and it's been picked up by international media as well. And they will have to come out and clarify this issue. The reality is there's a huge security challenge in Mozambique. Whether authorities can try and deny that, it is a reality. You know, I was talking to one analyst who's based in Mozambique, and she was telling me that the fear is that now you have these guns all over the place and people having access to this strong military capability or weapons. And for South Africa, I guess this becomes a problem because these are our neighbors, and those guns can make their way to South Africa, you know, with the challenge of security also in South Africa and crime. And I think this is a serious problem. The Mozambique government is mum, but the reality is this has gotten out of control, and I think they will have to do something. Unfortunately, after South Africa issued a statement calling all stakeholders to engage in dialogue, some people are criticizing South Africa, but South Africa is going to suffer in terms of trade and investment, but also security. Because as I pointed out, if people have arms and these arms can end up in South Africa, they can be sold in South Africa. You know, we've had that problem of proliferation of arms in our country, and particularly in that border. And therefore, now you have this situation. So if you are South Africa, there's no way you can fold your arms and say, I will wait for SADC and the Troika and the AU or whoever. The reality is South Africa is going to be affected. People are going to cross the border. They won't go to Zimbabwe. They won't go to Zambia. Majority will come to South Africa.
But then now, do you get a sense that even the protesters themselves understand that with the escape of these hardened criminals, there's a possibility that they could also be in danger, because you've got hardened criminals that will infiltrate the spaces of modern civic movements who, as some might say, are protesting for legitimate issues which are generally social issues, not just the electoral outcome. Could this not delegitimize their own fight as well, where now you'll be unable to distinguish between the legitimate protesters who are protesting over social issues and those who will be brandishing guns and killing other people and destroying infrastructure?
There's a concern now that the distraction to key infrastructure and key institutions, it's not something even the parties would want to see happening. Because if they were to inherit this or country tomorrow or get into power tomorrow as part of the discussions or by elections, how do you govern a country that is now engulfed in lawlessness and there's challenges of security, there's no infrastructure? So behind the scenes, the leaders themselves are worried. Unfortunately, these are young people. They have nothing to lose, and some of them are not unemployed, and therefore life is miserable, and therefore for them, it doesn't make any difference. And therefore, I think this speaks to when we say on the continent, if leaders don't address the socio-economic conditions of their respective countries, this is what's likely going to happen. With this continent, when you look at the population being young people and unemployed, it's easy to mobilize them. And when they are mobilized, to demobilize them, it will be a problem, because you can't tomorrow give them jobs as they want jobs. And therefore that will continue. And therefore it is important for leaders to look at what's happening in Mozambique, look at those young people who are out there and ask themselves hard questions. Are you addressing the needs of your people as you have claimed to be representing the people, including in parliament, in government? Because if you don't do that, this will happen.
Sophie, thank you very much for speaking to us. That's SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena, giving us the very latest on the prison break by some prisoners in Mozambique.